Okay, just to review classroom procedures one more time. Every day when you come to class, you should have read the textbook and watched the videos for the section we're going to be working on in class. And then you walk into class, immediately open your Chromebook. You're going to take the textbook and video check over that section that checks that you actually read the textbook and watched the videos for that class. If you miss the day that we have a textbook check on that section, you don't have to make up that textbook check, but you still have to be prepared the next day for the next section. Questions on that? I'd like to get the textbook and video check done within the first 4 to 5 minutes. So from now on, if you need a drink or a bathroom break, can you wait until after we do the textbook check so we're not holding the rest of the class up with that? In fact, I'll probably have you wait until I finish talking about the material. When I return you to be able to do CK12 and WebWork stuff, then if you need to go to the restroom or get a drink, you can do it. That makes sense? Because we're already like 10 minutes into class and we are just now starting. The days we have quizzes or tests, there will be no textbook check. There will be no new work that we're going to be doing that day. If you finish the quiz before everybody else, then you can take the rest of the time to maybe do the pre-work for that next section that would be coming up the next day. Okay. Okay, so what we'll do, I'll go through this section material, just briefly talk about stuff that you've already read about and already watched the videos on, to hit the highlights. And then if you've got questions on yesterday's work, it's not due till midnight tonight, and I do that on purpose, so you can bring those questions to me now. We can talk through a couple of your questions on 1-1, and then you guys can start working on CK12 and 1-2. Remember that CK12 is extra credit. So you have to have that completed 100% for every section before the first quiz if you want extra credit on the quiz. Okay, so if it's not done like 1-1, if it's not done by midnight tonight, that's fine, but as long as it's done by the very first, by the quiz date, then it'll count for extra credit. WebWork will close tonight at midnight, so it does have a deadline. CK12's deadline is the next quiz or the next test. Does that make sense? Okay, so this section we talk about 5 properties. The commutative property, the associative property, the distributive property, and then they talk about the inverse and identity. That's the one I was looking for. Okay, so distributive property, this one's really easy for most people because you've done distribution when you're solving equations enough that you recognize the word. Okay, so the distributive property, if I have 4 in front of the expression x plus 3, I need to distribute that 4 into both terms. That's the distributive property, is distributing it into both terms. Okay. The associative and commutative, this is where a lot of you get confused. Okay. The associative property, in my mind, I remember it as you're always going to have parentheses with the associative property because you're associating terms together in different ways. Associative. Okay. So, as an example, this is an example of the associative property. It doesn't matter how I associate with addition or multiplication. I can change what I do first. If I want to do this first and then add z, or if I want to take this and add y plus z, I get the same answer. So the associative property has to do with how things are associated. Always think parentheses, if you're wondering. Okay? The commutative property just says the order doesn't matter. X plus 3 is the same as 3 plus x. 3 plus 4 is the same as 4 plus 3. It doesn't matter which comes first. I'm going to get the same answer. That's the commutative property. Commutative property has to do with the order. Associative property has to do with what's associated together. Does that help clear those two up a little bit? Okay. The inverse property is just the reciprocal, right? If we have 1/3 and we want the inverse is 3 over 1. With multiplication, I should say, the inverse property of multiplication. The inverse property of addition, if I want to find the inverse of 3, what do I do? Yeah, it's -3. It's the number when you add to it that you get 0. With multiplication, it's the number you multiply it by to get 1. That's the inverse property. You take the inverse. The multiplicative inverse is just the flip of the fraction or the whole number. The additive inverse is the opposite sign. Okay, and then the last one is the identity property. The identity property, it says for addition, what can I add or subtract to a number and keep that identity? So what number do I add or subtract to 3 to keep it 3? 0. That's the identity property of addition. What number do I multiply by a number to keep that number to be the same? 1. So that's your identity property. So those are the 5 properties you need to know. You may have a question that just says, match these to their identities. You may have a question on a quiz that says, which property is this? So you need to know what the difference is between the distributive, the commutative, the associative, the inverse property, and the identity property is. Okay, the rest of this section hopefully looked pretty easy still to you guys. We're still doing a lot of review on Algebra 1. It's solving equations and simplifying expressions, and also maybe if y equals 3t plus 4, what is y when x is 1? Understanding that you just take 1, you plug it in for t, and solve and get 7. Right? It's just plugging in, substituting numbers in. Again, simplifying like terms, solving equations when you have 2 unknowns, something like that. So this section shouldn't be too hard for everybody. It's just maybe a review of those properties. Okay, so now let's jump in to, make sure I started this. Yeah, make sure I'm still recording. Questions you have on 1-1. So, Chantel, did I answer that question, or do you still have an issue with another problem? Okay. Who has a question?
I wasn't listening with you guys.
So you had number 8 you were struggling through. So give me a problem in number 8, and I will work it for you.
Why do we have to log in? I got number 1.
So just give me one you don't have.
Oh, okay. 2.09.
Say that again. 2.09, 209,
Yeah.
209, and so on. Okay, so this is what's repeating.
So you took it times 1,000. Is that right?
Well, what we need to do first is make sure we're starting with the decimal that's repeating. So if we want 209 to be what we want to call repeating, or we could call it 092 is repeating, right? 092, 092, 092, 092. So if we want to say the repeating pattern is 092, we are good to go to start with. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So we don't have to multiply it by anything?
To start with, no, not on this one. We let x equal this. Now we multiply it so that we get that repeating pattern again. So now I have to multiply it by 1,000. And I get 2092.092 repeating.
Okay, and then I subtracted it, so I have 999x equals, and then how do I subtract it? I got confused there.
Well, 2092 minus 2 is 2090.
Don't we have the decimals together? Like, when we're subtracting it?
Yeah,
So it would just be...
there's my decimal.
Oh. Okay, got it. That's where I messed up.
Okay, and then we just take 2090, divide it by 999, and you should have the right answer. Let me catch Tanner.
So wait, if you do say that 209 is the repeating number,
Okay.
could you times it by 1/10 and then move the decimal back?
Okay. Hold on a second. No, you want to do multiples of 10, not divide. You don't want to divide it or multiply by a decimal. It'll just complicate things. So if you wanted 209 to be the repeating pattern, and this is what I want to repeat, I'm still going to let x equal that, but now I've got to start with this pattern repeating. So the first thing I have to do is move it over twice. So I have 100x equals 209.209, right? And then I've got to move it over 3 times again. So I've got 100, there's 2 zeros, and then 3 more zeros is 5 zeros, 10,000, right?
Yeah.
100,000.
Yeah, that would be.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you do the math, you'll still get the same thing. You're going to have a lot more simplifying here at the end, like having to simplify your fraction, you know. So it's probably easiest to find the closest repeating pattern you can. You can do it both ways and you'll get the same answer, but this way is going to be faster and easier.
How do we know how many places to take it? Like, how do we know?
Okay, so give me your problem.
So, 0.9167. 9167.
Okay, so my repeating pattern are these 4 numbers. And the repeating pattern starts immediately after the decimal, so I don't have to do anything to get started. I'm just going to let x equal this number. And now I need to move the decimal over until that pattern repeats again. So for me to do that, it's got to move 1, 2, 3, 4 places. Okay, when I move a decimal over to the right 4 places, what do I multiply it by? To move 2, it's 100. To move 3, it's 1,000. To move 4, it's 10,000. Okay, so I'm going to have 10,000x. And then once I've moved it over, I have that when I moved it over. Now when I subtract, my decimal goes to 0, which is the whole point of me moving it over. And then I can get 9167, and then I have 9,999x when I subtract. And then if you take 9,167 and divide it by 9,999, you should get the number you started with. So that's the way you can check your work.
So what's the answer, though?
9167 divided by 9999. Okay, I get the answer, 0.916791679166. So it works. Now, in WebWork, you have to simplify it if it can be simplified. Okay, so you have to take 9167, divide it by 9999, see if you can simplify it. The fastest way, honestly, graphing calculator, once I've taken 9167 divided by 9999, I get the answer, go back to number or math, fraction, and hit it again, and it'll give you the lowest fraction
Okay, so
there
that
can be.
fraction that's there on the board.
That's as low as it can go.
Okay, but that's the answer.
That's the answer.
See, that's what I don't
Yes.
understand. is I don't.
Make sure you give me something in there so that,
Use my
Yeah.
I'm
Chromebook.
confused about the WebWork section 1.2.
okay, give me a,
It says use the cumulative property of multiplication to write a Equivalent expression. So
Okay.
it's 5z plus 2, because it originally is 2 plus 5z. And it says that it is right.
it's multiplication though. That's the commutative property of addition. So it would be 2 plus z5, because the thing multiplied is 5z. You flip the order,
I would
Okay.
remember to
you know what I mean?
give the
Yeah, like
calculator
that.
back, but I wouldn't remember to grab whatever I put in.
That's the commutative property of multiplication.
Okay. Thank you.
Calculator's not gonna-
Oh,
I'll get a different one then.
okay, so I have a question on mine that, it's like 3.939393. But like, so I started off with like 100x, because I thought,
Well, this is x, because we've got the pattern already. We don't have to move it.
yeah,
And then we take 100x,
okay,
right?
yeah.
And now this goes away when we subtract.
Okay, yeah. But then like subtracting 390.
So
That's where I
393,
went wrong
minus 3 is 390.
Okay, that's where I'm.
Yep.